Hello and welcome to the presentation on deterrents to real estate investment for residential purposes, wherein we'll be mapping out and gauging the problems that prospective investors have while investing in real estate properties in the Vietnamese context. So, moving over to the question, why Vietnam? Why Vietnam as a real estate investment decision or as a destination? So, the reasons can be listed out as it is a center of commerce and finance. It's a growing hub for science, culture, education, and technology. While they have a very sizable young and dynamic population of over 8 million people, growing middle class. The reasons why do we have to invest? Well, for any financial decision that we make, there are primarily two reasons or two expectations out of an investment. First one is the capital appreciation, and second one would be the rental yields that would be obtained out of the property. Thirdly, it's affordable as compared to the other Southeast Asian peers and the growing tourism in Vietnam. Foreign home ownership norms have been relaxed with the effect from 1st July 2015, wherein essentially you can get to purchase an apartment or real estate by just having a passport and a valid visa. The eligibility norms are that you can purchase the lands on leasehold basis for a period of 50 years, post which renewal has to be done. And there are indeed a lot of rights and protections for property owners in Vietnam. Moving over to the problems or the deterrents that a lot of investors face while purchasing a real estate. Firstly, it's mostly due to the horror stories wherein tenants usually ghost the apartments and leave without any prior notice, putting the owners in a very uncomfortable spot. They can both influence the they can influence and reflect very real fears when it comes to having investing in property, and that is mostly for residential rental purposes. Post the 2008 financial crisis, many people have also started to look for alternatives for buying a home, and one of these alternatives is to rent out a property so that a continuous flow of income is generated along with property value appreciation. The significant barriers that we've identified while carrying out such investments are taxes and fees, the volatile house prices, concerns over collecting rent and property maintenance. So these barriers usually lead to a lot of hesitation while considering real estate investments, and even for those people who are already possessing them and have necessary capital to invest, these actually are quite it's a very big barrier for them to consider real estate as an investment. Moving over to the next slide, we can see that the cost of housing is a major issue due to the huge demand supply gap. According to a Financial Times study, the housing demand in London is 240,000 units a year, while the supply is just 120,000 units every year. That is just half of it. Post financial crisis, what actually happened was that there was a tighter access to bank credit, with lenders exercising more caution over the type of borrowers that they select and the people they select to lend to. This has led to greater pressure on financing properties and eventually led to increased rental demand. This posed a very good investment opportunity for people investing in real estate. Notwithstanding such investments, they do carry very high levels of risk, and the there is quite a bit of inclusion of subjectivity into such investment decisions. So, the expected results of a study that we intend to carry out is to increase the transparency in real estate investment decisions and provide the investors with a model or framework so as to help them decide on investing better or to gauge the cause effect relationships between the various factors that are identified as deterrents to investments. The premise on which we'll be building our study is that these decisions are made on well founded information. Right. So, the application and methodology. Here, the study was conducted using fuzzy cognitive maps, wherein the fuzzy cognitive maps represent the causality and causal propagation between various factors. This model was created and validated through direct participation of experts belonging to the real estate and the residential rental areas. The questions that were posed to them were based on their personal experience, what were the deterrents to real estate investments for residential rental purposes? As you can see in the picture, the respondents were asked to write down their responses on postage stickers and then paste it on a board. So, what happened exactly was that the participants wrote the criteria they considered the most relevant to the problem at hand. Post that, while negative cause and effect relationships were identified, they were uh, assigned a negative sign, and post that, they were grouped into clusters of related criteria. Like as you can see in the figure, the barriers to investment lies at the top, which is connected with seven different factors or clusters, and then these clusters are again influenced by various other factors. So the reorganization criteria within each one in terms of relative importance was done. That is, the factor with the highest importance was given the highest score, and then the intensity values for each of the relationships were decided. This was done, and a central analysis of the indices were done, and the actual deterrents of the real estate investments were identified. That will be seen in a while. So the analysis and findings were that prior to acquiring property for residential rental purposes, the main concerns of investors were the tenant risk behaviors, which had a score of 22, the location factor, which had a score of 16, associated costs, having a score of 16, tenant characteristics with a score of 12, legal and administrative obstacles with a score of 9, macroeconomic factors with a score of 8.9, and indecision or gut feel factors with a score of 8. Well, start coming over to the factors one by one. What tenant risk behaviors pertain to the possibility that the tenant would engage in some sort of illegal activity or would be subletting the property or would be doing some sort of trafficking or other illegal human activities in the property. Location was the second largest concern, wherein the noise and the level of noise around the property was an important factor. The access to amenities, public transport, and parking were the other factors that influenced it, and the proximity to public housing estates were also important. Third factor was the associated costs. They mainly relate to the costs that have to be bared by the owner and comprise of taxes, condominium fees, repairs and real estate agent commissions for letting out or subletting out the property. Tenant characteristics comprises of the instances of age, nationality, social status, wherein people are more wary of letting out their properties to nationals of other countries, and also the factors that whether they do have children, pets, or their habit of smoking also have considerable effect on the tenant characteristics that a usual owner looks into. The legal or administrative factors consider the red tapeism involved in these investments, which pertain to changing in correspondent addresses, investigating the background of a tenant, and if in case the tenant is not readily vacating the property, some coercive strategies that are needed to force his or her exit are also some of the factors that are considered. The macroeconomic factors include the interest rates, the access to bank credit, and property depreciation. Indecision or gut feel factors are again subjective in nature, wherein there might be some sort of disagreement between the owner and the tenant as with respect to who would be paying the utilities and the different lifestyle challenges that the owner might face on account of the tenant, as well as a history of the property when some people in certain properties people commit suicide or some murders may have happened. Would that also form a big deterrent factor? To conclude the study, what we have done in this particular project is that we've understood the variables that create resistance to investments, and that goes towards forming the first step in making solutions to overcome them. Knowing the potential investors' main concerns can also help real estate agents address them appropriately. Investors themselves can also mitigate some of their worries by establishing some predefined rules with the tenants. And while some of the macroeconomic constraints are out of the stakeholders' hand, becoming more knowledgeable and informed about certain issues will also help them make better investing decisions. The role of policymakers in promoting real estate investments of this nature will be discussed in just a while. So, and since many of the obstacles are also pertaining to legal and administrative costs relating to the registration and taxes, government does indeed play a very important role over here. So, the recommendation and limitations of a study include the direct involvement of decision makers gives a greater consistency to the model and functionality. Stakeholders, investors, and banks can make use of the study of this model and understand the issue of obstacles in investment, and also visualize how changes in the other variables can affect their decisions or do a scenario analysis. Limitations would be the idiosyncrasy and the subjectivity of the model, as the behaviors, patterns, and opinions differ from person to person. So we cannot consider them as absolute and binding. What the future consideration of the study can offer is replicating the methodological processes that we've adopted in the study with a different group of decision makers, extending the methodological approach to other contexts, and combining different methodologies to make the evaluation system more robust. So, what the government can do in such a scenario? Well, one of the most important factors is increasing the land values and the mode of value capture. So, this can be done by rationalizing the value capture of land use and land appreciation, by improving public investment in infrastructure, as better public amenities improve the living conditions of a certain area, and as the livability increases, so does the demand, and so does the price and the return on investment. So there are three important sets of policies that influence the capture. First is the macroeconomic policies, the direct regulation comprising of taxes on title and transfer of title, and capital gains tax, and indirect instruments like exactions, wherein the developer provides alternative public utilities or facilities that are given to public for use in kind in a return for the land that has been provided to the developer for constructing the building or real estate. What is needed over here is proper institutionalization of building laws and reforms, and prevention of haphazard construction that puts excessive pressure on existing public utilities and civic amenities, thereby causing a deterioration in the quality of life that people have to live with in developing cities. With that being said, I conclude my presentation over here, and here are the references that have been considered while preparing the paper. Thank you very much.